Welcome to the Top 10 at 10. Today is May the 12th, 2014, and these are the top 10 news stories. And I'm your host, Dad, right? I think I forgot that part. Right or far ugly. Okay. Story number 10. This came out over the weekend, or at least that's when I saw it, from the New York Times Deal Book. Oh no, this is May 6th. Well, it's news to me now. Hedge fund moguls' pay has the 1% looking up. So hedge fund managers heavily populate the so-called 1% in the United States, and they're getting richer. The 25 highest earning hedge fund managers in the United States took home a total of $21.15 billion in compensation in 2013, according to an annual ranking published, I guess, last week, Tuesday. They earned that hefty sum in a year when most hedge fund managers fell short. David Tepper, 56-year-old founder of Appaloosa Management, maintained his top spot. The size of these paychecks are estimated based on the value of managers' stakes in their hedge funds and the fees they charge. Investors typically pay management fees of 2% of the total assets under management and 20% of the profits, or 2 and 20. Mr. Tepper returned 42% to investors in his flagship Appaloosa investment, one, Palomino funds, partly driven by big bets on formerly down-and-out airline stocks. While the fees you can pay vary, investors in Appaloosa typically follow the 2 and 20 pattern. And then there's Mr. Paulson, Steve Cohen, which is funny because Steve Cohen's basically been banned from handling other people's money, but he's made enough himself where I guess it doesn't matter. Mr. Cohen returned 20.1% to investors in his multi-billion-dollar SAC Capital Advisors, and his paycheck was lifted by the 50% fee he charged them. Jeez. He has been near the top rankings for all but 1 year, but it will most likely be Mr. Cohen's last time on the list, which tracked managers who invest outside money as part of an agreement with the government last year to plead guilty to securities fraud violations and pay a record $1.2 billion penalty. SAC agreed to close its doors to outside investors and manage only Mr. Cohen's personal wealth, which is immense. So, I mean, this is just a phenomenal amount of money that's being made here by these guys. This is Tepper, I mean, this is like over 17 billion total. So you've got, talk about two economies. These people are making billions. But with historic amounts, investors put 63.7 billion into hedge funds last year alone. And these guys, by the way, I think this should be noted, are paying 15%. People who work for a living are, they're paying at the top rate, 36%. These people are paying 15% on billions and hundreds of millions and tens of millions. I mean, it's ridiculous. So there's your economy. And story number 9 is the Obama administration taking issue with Thomas Piketty. Obama's top economist has some problems with Piketty's book, the French economist Thomas Piketty's book. On the future of inequality is the buzz of the economics world this season. Now President Obama's chief economist has weighed in on its thesis. The first time a senior administration official has discussed it in detail, and he is skeptical. Oh, big surprise, because it's an incredible indictment of Obama's failed policies to do anything about wealth inequality. Jason Furman, the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, grappled with Mr. Piketty's book in a speech on the global economy in Ireland on Wednesday. Mr. Furman starts with a relatively straightforward description. There has been an increase in inequality with labor income. Mr. Furman argues at the top end, superstars in fields like finance and sports are paid more than ever, both in absolute terms and relative to typical workers. Meanwhile, wages have been depressed. Whose fault is that? But while these changes are real and important, particularly in the United States, the crux of Mr. Piketty's argument is that the more important shift to the long run is toward enormous accumulations of wealth in the form of capital, which, so long as returns on capital rise more quickly than the overall economy and taxes on capital remain low, can create a vicious cycle of ever-growing dynastic wealth. This is what happened, he argues, in the 19th century, a cycle broken only by wars and political revolution. Whereas Mr. Furman summarizes in the prepared text of his speech, the most striking argument in Piketty's book is that to the degree that growth rates slow in the future because of demographic or other factors, this will inevitably lead to a sustained increase in inequality. But Mr. Furman wasn't completely buying it. This thesis is intriguing and important, he said, although it is unclear how likely it is. Piketty's prediction is that the capital share of income will rise, pushing it in the direction of increased inequality. This is only one of the determinants of inequality. While the trends may continue to shift in that direction, a more important factor today has been inequality within labor income. No, not true. And while Piketty implicitly takes this to be fixed, there is no a priority basis to predict whether it will rise or fall in the future, because it is a function of unpredictable technological developments. Oh, that is such concern trolling. It wasn't as bad as I thought, which is them denying it's a trend. They're claiming that you cannot predict, maybe what if wages go up? Of course, what they don't understand is it's somewhat irrelevant. I mean, you look at the Silicon Valley attempt at wage suppression. There was an agreement between Apple, Google, as other people to suppress wages. So, yes, technological changes will happen, but if the people involved are conspiring to suppress wages, it doesn't matter. So, not surprisingly, a pretty lame attempt to debunk Piketty from the liberals in the Obama administration. Story number 8. It's from Media Matters, how a Daily Beast article became a Clinton smear. A Daily Beast article relying on anonymous criticism of Hillary Clinton was latched onto by conservative media who selectively quoted the article to smear the former Secretary of State for not officially designating the Nigerian group Boko Haram and a terrorist organization. As Maggie Haberman noted in Politico, following the kidnapping of Nigerian girls, conservatives began hyping a report from the Daily Beast which quoted an anonymous official criticizing the former Secretary of State for previously turning down requests to designate Boko Haram as a terrorist organization, implying that such a designation could have prevented the kidnapping. The actual details, as Haberman explained, reveal that experts at State were concerned. So Clinton found herself at the receiving end, a question of Daily Beast. Republicans have widely circulated the original Daily Beast story. The actual details of why the Clinton-run department declined to affix the group with terror status are complicated. Yeah, I mean, the Daily Beast this is from Eli Lake. It's bullshit. It's like almost everything he writes, which is a complete fabrication. So, this is not the first time Daily Beast reporting has fed conservative smears. Last year, reporter Eli Lake became a key validator of the Benghazi hoax, glossing over relevant facts in his report. Yeah, no kidding. Story number 7. This is from Salon. Charter schools are cheating your kids, report reveals massive fraud, mismanagement, abuse. Millions are being sucked from the public schools into corporate pockets. Just in time for National Charter School Week, there's a new report highlighting the predictable perils of turning education into a poorly regulated business titled Charter School Vulnerabilities to Waste, Fraud, and Abuse. The report focused on 15 states representing the large charter markets out of the 42 states that have charter schools, drawing on news reports, criminal complaints, regulatory findings, audits, and other sources. It, quote, found fraud, waste, and abuse cases totaling over $100 million in losses to taxpayers, but warned that due to inadequate oversight, the fraud and mismanagement that has been covered thus far might be just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, the charter schools, first off, they don't outperform regular schools, despite taking students, the best students, also known as creaming. Despite creaming the best students, they still don't outperform public schools. So they don't take disabled kids, they don't take troublemakers, they take these kids who meet very high criteria based on what they have available, and they still can't beat regular schools. And the value of charters is it's a hype. It's all hype. They don't outperform. Philadelphia is ground zero. Edison Schools Incorporated took the schools private, and they've gotten worse. It's just not a fix. It's not a magic bullet, and the people promoting it often are getting some money on the back end. So it's just charter schools are a disaster. It's not a fix. By the way, the idea that better schools fix poverty, there's no evidence for that whatsoever. But what fixes poverty is economic opportunity, which is tangentially related to education at best. A lot of, as we're finding out now, capitalism naturally leads towards big divisions, and so the education you're going to get in a charter school versus the schools in the local area is minimal. The difference is minimal at best, but you are going to pay more for it, so not a good deal. Story number 6. PBS NewsHour. This is by David Graeber. Ask yourself, says a notorious Occupy academic, should your job exist? I love this. Editor's note, if you're reading this at work, you're probably not all that busy, except it is my work. Okay, but don't you ever wish you could just fit your work into a few hours and go home to do your own thing instead of being paid to look busy all day? John Maynard Keynes predicted in 1930 that technological advancement would make that possible by the turn of the century. He foresaw a 15-hour work week. There you go. Instead, Americans are now working more and more hours, but what are they actually doing? Asked American anthropologist David Graeber. It's as if someone were out there making up pointless jobs just for the sake of keeping us all working. Graeber wrote in the summer 2013 essay in Strike magazine that we'll call BS jobs. For one thing, he writes, we've created entirely new jobs to accommodate the workaday world. Administrators think telemarketing and financial services, and the growing number of human resources and public relations professionals can't pick up their own pizzas or walk their dogs. That's why Graeber says we have all-night pizza delivery men and dog walkers. Graeber's rather rank vision of hell captures the cycle of meaningless work he's criticizing. Once, when contemplating the apparently endless growth of administrative responsibilities in British academic departments, I came up with one possible vision of hell. Hell is a collection of individuals who are spending the bulk of their time working on a task they don't like and are not especially good at. Say they were hired because they are excellent cabinet makers and then discover they are expected to spend a great deal of their time frying fish. There are only a limited number of fish that need to be fried, yet somehow they all become so obsessed with resentment at the thought that some of their coworkers might be spending more time making cabinets and not doing their fair share of fish frying responsibilities, that before long there's endless piles of useless, badly cooked fish piling up all over the workshop, and it's all that anyone really does. Graeber is a professor at the London School of Economics, so isn't that a classic example of frying fish? He welcomes that question, but quickly dismisses it, saying he wouldn't dare tell anyone who truly believes in their work that it's not meaningful. It's those workers who are already cognizant of the futility of their day that he's after, like his friend, the poet, musician, turned corporate lawyer, whom he told us about in his previous Making Sense post on the guaranteed basic income. Those are his fish fryers, resenting the cabinet makers for doing real work. Paul Solomon interviewed Graeber for our broadcast segment. Okay, cool. Always good to see from David Graeber, and definitely a very interesting critique. Story number 5, the unbearable whiteness of liberal media. If left-leaning publications value diversity, why don't they have any? That's a good point. On the staff of the American Prospect, I'm the only member of an ethnic minority because I bring all the variety the magazine needs, or because the editors don't think diversity is valuable. Jeez. Hitting your own employer there, I like it. Everyone on the masthead of the liberal publication is committed to being inclusive, not just of racial and ethnic minorities, but of women, gays, lesbians, and transgender people, and the poor. It's not just the Prospect. Journalism upstarts from Vox Media and 538 have come under fire recently for a lack of diversity in their hires, but that's largely because they're drawing from the milky white pool of existing talent. In the corner of the publishing industry that caters to college-educated wonks, a slightly fuzzy designation, but I've included most of the publications my colleagues and I read on a daily basis. Racial and ethnic diversity is abysmal. Nearly 40% of the country is non-white. The number of minorities that the outlets included in this article's tally, most of them self-identified as liberal or progressive, hovers around 10%. The Washington Monthly can boast 20%. That's because it only has 9 staffers in total, 2 of whom belong to minority groups. Dissent has none. Given the broad commitment to diversity in our corner of the publishing world, why is this track record so poor? Corporate America long ago signed up to the idea that diversity, besides being a noble goal, is good for business. Whatever. Companies with diverse workforces, that's not true. Consistently outperform. What is this nonsense? The corporate, it's total, it's total opportunism. They don't care about diversity. A newsroom filled with white guys simply lacks the same imagination as one with people with an array of backgrounds. A large part of the problem is simply that no one is keeping track. Unlike the National Association of News Editors, the American Society of Magazine Editors does not track the number of minorities among magazine staff. Most of the editors I spoke with conceded up front their record of hiring and retaining people of color was poor, but few knew the number offhand. Most, however, knew their VITA score. I don't know what that is, and remember answering for it since the organization VITA, Women in Literary Arts, has tallied the number of women on staff. Okay. So there is apparently a metric for women in these workplaces. Interesting. And I think he said like the nation is the worst. Huh. Let's see. Well, there's a little chart over there. I'll just look at this real quick before I move on. 538. Atlantic. Descent. 0. Harper's. Mother Jones. Nation. Jeez. That is pretty bad. This highlights another key reason the country's leading think publications lack diversity: the industry's reliance on social networks for hiring. Interesting. This is an interesting read. So I guess they do a sort of a breakdown here, and a lot of these left-wing outlets are not very diverse. So interesting read over at the American Prospect. Story number 4 should be, yep. This is from Chris Hedges. His suit apparently was denied by the Supreme Court. They weren't going to hear his the U.S. Supreme Court decision. So this is Chris Hedges. We're losing the last shreds of legal rights from Truthdig. The U.S. Supreme Court decision to refuse to hear our case concerning Section 1021 B2 of the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, which permits the military to seize U.S. citizens and hold them indefinitely in military detention centers without due process, means that this provision will continue to be law. It means the nation has entered a post-constitutional era. It means that extraordinary rendition of U.S. citizens on U.S. soil by our government is legal. It means that the courts, like the legislative and executive branches of government, exclusively serve corporate power, one of the core definitions of fascism. It means that the internal mechanisms of state are so corrupted and subservient to corporate power that there's no hope of reform or protection for citizens under our most basic constitutional rights. It means that the consent of the governed, a poll by Open Congress showed that the provision had a 98% disapproval rating, is a cruel joke. And it means that if we do not rapidly build militant mass movements to overthrow corporate tyranny, including breaking the back of the two-party duopoly, that is the mask of corporate power, we will lose our liberty. Right, this was Hedges versus Obama on the NDAA. And it was denied, and he's basically saying that because there was no hearing, I guess So I guess that's it. I guess NDAA stands. It is capitalism, not government, that is the problem. The fusion of corporate and state power means that government is broken. It is little more than a protection racket for Wall Street, and it is our job to wrest government back. Well, good luck with that. So, Chris Hedges, even more down than usual. Who thought it possible? Story number 3. This is in response to the Newsweek story. Someone is trying to sabotage U.S.-Israel intelligence cooperation. This is from Israel Hayom. Day after Newsweek publishes article alleging Israeli espionage against the U.S., Israeli intelligence minister Yuval Steinitz rejects the allegation, says intelligence cooperation between Israel and the U.S. is outstanding. Newsweek versus Israel Intelligence Apparatus Round 2. Over the weekend, the news magazine published another article claiming that Even during the best of times, the intelligence relationship between Israel and the U.S. and Israel has been a hostile friendship, or as Newsweek put it, a friendship between frenemies. Guys, got to work on the English on this thing. Israeli officials were quick to reject the allegations raised by the article, with Intelligence Minister Yuval Steinitz saying Saturday that, quote, it appears that someone is trying to sabotage the excellent intelligence cooperation between the U.S. and Israel. That cooperation apparently means them spying on America. So what are Newsweek claiming this time? In order to prove that the relationship between Israel and the U.S. is one of both love and hate, a senior former U.S. intelligence operative told journalist Jeff Stein that ahead of former U.S. Vice President Gore's visit to Israel 16 years ago, an American Secret Service agent identified someone trying to break into Gore's hotel room through the air ducts. He hears a noise in the vents, and he sees the vent clips being moved from the inside, and then he sees a guy starting to exit the vent into the room. The anonymous operative said as soon as the Secret Service agent cleared his throat, the man, who the operative claims was an Israeli spy, disappeared back into the vent. Huh? Okay. Apparently they're spying on each other. Yep, I think Israel absolutely considers the U.S. an intelligence target. I don't think that's beyond dispute. Story number 2 from the Wall Street Journal. FCC had to revise broadband rules. Agency won't let firms segregate between web traffic into fast and slow lanes. The head of the Federal Communications Commission is revising proposed rules for regulating broadband internet, including offering assurances that the agency won't allow companies to segregate web traffic into fast and slow lanes. The new language by FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler, to be circulated as early as Monday, is an attempt to address criticism of his proposal unveiled last month that would ban broadband providers from blocking or slowing down websites that allow them to strike deals in which content companies would pay them for faster delivery of web content to consumers, or customers, I should say. The plan has drawn criticism from a wide range of players in the technology world, including Google, Netflix, and dozens of other prominent tech investors. In the new draft, Mr. Wheeler is sticking to the same basic approach, but will include language that will make clear that the FCC will scrutinize deals to make sure that the broadband providers don't unfairly put non-paying companies' content at a disadvantage. Oh, bullshit. Make it a common carrier or shut up. This is so dishonest. Mr. Wheeler's language will also invite comments on whether broadband internet service should be considered a public utility, yes, which would subject it to greater regulation. The FCC has so far not classified broadband as a utility, and providers have fiercely opposed such a move, saying it would cause innovation investment to collapse. Bullshit. Also worth noting, the internet, by the way, this is also worth noting, the internet is developed by the government. It wasn't developed by Comcast and AT&T. In fact, AT&T specifically said they did not believe in the technology was possible, which is why DARPA ended up doing it, because AT&T straight up said, oh, packet shifting, that's impossible. We're not going to invest in that. And now they're claiming the innovation will collapse. They're not innovating. They're not investing. We have one of the worst broadband systems in the first world, developing world, or developed world, I should say. So it's just total bunk. Story number 1. From Fardog Lake, yours truly. East Ukraine votes for independence as reports claim 400 Blackwater troops in the country. In turbulent elections that occurred over the weekend, parts of East Ukraine voted for independence from Kiev. Controversial vote is widely seen as a first step by those territories to joining the Russian Federation. During the election, armed forces loyal to Kiev attempted to stop the vote, in some cases firing on civilians. Kiev has claimed the election as a farce, while Russia has been coy as to what it will actually do in response to the vote, other than calling for dialogue. So large majorities voted, 90% in some cases. Also breaking during the weekend was a story by Der Spiegel and Bild that American mercenaries were on the ground in Kiev. According to the report, 400 mercenaries from Academy, formerly Blackwater, were on the ground involved in a punitive operation mounted by Ukraine's new government. Der Spiegel claims the information originates from U.S. intelligence services. Now that parts of East Ukraine were formally voted for independence from Kiev, is a prospect for a peace deal that involves Kiev ruling East Ukraine appears increasingly unlikely. Right, the prospect for any peace deal that involves Kiev ruling East Ukraine appears increasingly unlikely. Are we one step closer to civil war? To all-out civil war? I would say yes, but that's why you open the question, see what other people think. And that was the top 10 at 10. If you have a story you'd like me to feature on the top 10 at 10, please tweet me at Dan S. Wright, and be sure to read all the stories at firedogwake.com. Thanks for watching. See you next time.